All right, everybody, welcome back to Skywatchers Radio, right here on the Dark Matter Radio Network, and, of course, PSN Radio. With us now, our guest for the next half hour, Mr. Stephen Bassett is on the line with us, and we're going to talk about, a couple things, starting off with the passing of Lloyd Pye, a good friend, a mentor to many, and such a gentleman, Lloyd Pye. Stephen, welcome to the show, my friend.
It's good to be with you again.
Tell us a little bit about your history with Lloyd. I know you wanted to give the audience a little bit of your background with Lloyd and what he meant to ufology.
Well, Lloyd and I were just 1 year apart in age, and I've met him several times over the years. We both had friends in London, UK. Linda McKenzie's a wonderful woman, has helped me. We stayed there at her place as he was over doing research on the Starchild skull. And he's one of many colleagues. And over the 17 years that I've been in the field, I've gotten to know a large number of people that sort of represent this community of citizen science researchers. Actually, it's citizen science researcher activists is what it is. And what I mean by that, because of the ET tooth embargo, not a single college university in the country is teaching extraterrestrial phenomena, teaching about this issue, in spite of all the vast information that's available.
Correct, yeah.
And there are no academics that, with very few exceptions, will even come out and address the issue in a comprehensive way. There are a few, but even then they have to do this sort of on the edges, nothing in the center. And so the community had to do its own science, had to do its own research, had to create its own journals to try to investigate what was going on with no funding because of the truth embargo. There's been no philanthropic funding, both private or institutional. There's really no government funding. So they had to pay for it themselves out of their own pockets.
Right.
The work itself is difficult, and it's controversial. So it takes price. There's price to be paid sometimes in family and relationships. And I see this throughout the community. The sacrifices that are made, which just is even more galling than when people who don't know better criticize or make fun of the people that are pursuing this issue. People who wouldn't even think of making the sacrifices the individuals are making. Lloyd was one of these. He's a very smart fellow, wonderful college career, an athlete, good writer, lecturer, really could have done anything he wanted. He certainly could have been a mainstream writer of books, a mainstream lecturer, projects very well, but he embraced this issue and went down that path.
Now, he's best known, of course, for the Starchild skull that he discovered, and that's really what mainstream people in ufology kind of know him from, but he's meant so much more than that to ufology.
Well, that's where he ends up, but he had a life before that, and
right.
And he's an upbeat, positive guy, healthy, didn't smoke, didn't drink, and all of that. And what I know so when he finally arrives at his sort of, I guess you could say, destiny, which is the Starchild skull, which comes into his comes onto his radar, becomes aware of it. It's owned by a couple in Mexico, and starts to get into it. He finally has found his end game, and it's a tough road, a very, very tough road. There's just nothing more difficult than materials analysis or bioanalysis in this field, because you have to engage mainstream science to go anywhere. It's one of those things where just citizen science ain't going to cut it. If you've got a piece of metal, you say it's from the Roswell crash, you just can't take it to the guy down the street to look at his garage and then say, oh, we have an extraterrestrial piece of metal. You have got to get big-time metallurgists to look at this analyze it with highly sophisticated equipment, extremely expensive. This is one of the most difficult paths to take. William Moulton Howe is taking this path, Roger Lear is taking this path, and Lloyd took it with the Starchild skull. And all I can say is I couldn't have done it. It would have been more than I could have borne because it cost a ton of money. He had to raise money. Yep. He didn't spend any of it himself. It all had to go to pursue this research, which is why he didn't have any health insurance, which, like so many of my colleagues, meant that he could afford to go get checkups and things, wasn't able to do the things you really should do to avoid having a serious medical problem. Mm-hmm. But he did it all with this very positive, upbeat attitude, about as positive a person as I have run into in the field. Always looking forward, never criticizing others, just staying focused on what you're doing. That's exactly the kind of person it took to deal with what was involved in resolving the issue around this skull. It was going to take somebody like Lloyd. Otherwise, it just would burn out. They couldn't do it. So, it was just awful when I learned that he, basically, at the same age as I, got handed this really bad roll of the dice, which is essentially the very aggressive lymphoma cancer. Mm-hmm. There are many kinds of lymphoma cancers. He got just about the worst, and because he didn't have medical insurance, because he didn't have the money to go to doctors all the time, because he was wrapped up in passion about what he was doing. He wasn't getting checkups, and when they found it, it was the size of a softball.
And he had no pain, which is another thing. He went in for something completely different. He had no pain associated with the cancer. It was something else that he had wrong with him. I think it was a bladder issue.
That's why you get physicals. That's why you get checkups. That's why you get physical. Because you have to catch it. Well, of course, if it happens to be this kind, again, you're in trouble. But and look, I'm angry not only about Lloyd but also about the American healthcare system, which is a disaster. Yes. It's illusion, and it's just awful. Not for the rich. The rich are fine. But for the general public, it is a catastrophe, and yet you got all these people running around saying it's the best in the world. All of this drives me crazy, but I won't go there. Just to say that that just makes it a little harder to deal with the fact that we've lost a good man, and we lost others, and we're going to lose more because if you don't have insurance, if you're putting everything into your activism or your science, if you're pursuing the kinds of things we pursue with the kind of passion, you're going to roll the dice. And you're not going to take care of this and that. You're not going to go to the doctors, and you can get nailed. And this is going to happen again. But that said, I'm very pained that Lloyd did not live to see the resolution of that research. Whatever he had there, whatever that score presents,
what was the latest on the research with the skull? I mean, I know there was testing done recently, or not recently, but not too long ago, that actually brought back some DNA results. Correct?
He's had a series of DNA results.
Okay.
This is extremely complicated stuff, and clearly there's anomalies. There's definitely anomalies,
right.
But when you get into that realm, I mean, it's one thing for an Air Force non-con to come forward and say, look, I was on a crash retrieval team, and I was sent out to retrieve crash, and we picked up this vehicle at such and such a place, and it had dead aliens. And I mean, that's one thing.
Right.
Pretty straightforward. It's a piece of it's first-hand testimony. It clearly points to an extraterrestrial reality. It is another thing to pursue the extraterrestrial issue by going through the scientific window of deep DNA analysis on anomalous biological specimen. This requires a scientific method process. It can take years and years to get resolved, which is, again, that's the path that he took. Assuming that the skull and the work that's been done is been passed on to a new caretaker. He certainly had time to do that. We don't know if he did or not, but I'll assume that some arrangements were made, and it will go forward. But again, it's not going to be easy. It may take a long time, but at some point we may know exactly what is going on with that skull, and his work will have a kind of closure.
Now, who's the caretaker of the skull now? Is this going to stay in his family? Is there somebody in particular?
Well, the skull. Remember, the skull is owned by a couple in Mexico. He has it essentially on loan to work with. So exactly the ownership of the skull, what's going to happen, I think it's probably complicated as well. Nothing's been said. Nothing's going to be said for a while. I imagine that someone in his family will make some sort of announcements in a certain amount of time about what's going to happen with that particular evidentiary work. Obviously, an awful lot's been done. It would be a shame if it was not completed. It may be that this is something that won't get resolved until after disclosure, like many, many other things, when the willingness and the money to pursue exactly what's going on with that skull will probably be abundant. Pre-disclosure may not be possible. In fact, I felt it was that way even while Lloyd was working on it. I felt that this was not a pre-disclosure resolution, that there was just too much involved and the resources weren't going to be there, not that it's still not worth doing. So, the long and the short of it is that, on a personal level, we lost a really good person that was nothing but a positive force in the field. That's always a tragedy. On another level, Lloyd is representative of the price that you have to pay to go and get involved in this kind of work, which then brings us into the consequences of truth embargo and government interference in the truth process and so forth. There's always going to be prices that are paid, and they're usually paid by the people. And that's happened before. And so these are the things that are on my mind as I consider Lloyd's passing.
Now, moving forward, what's actually developing now with the whole disclosure movement? I know you have the movie that's coming out, or you're working on still. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh yeah, there's a lot going on. There's been some very unusual developments in the last few days. As we've talked about on your show before, PRG is going to launch a fairly comprehensive, broad-spectrum campaign to get hearings in Congress on the ET issue early next year, hopefully by April latest, if not March. And what I mean is everybody has heard about all the witnesses that have been coming forward in the last 25 years, 30 years. Not 23 years, since 1991 primarily. But yeah, there's scores of them. And some of them were brought into the public arena in 2001 at a press conference at the National Press Club. Some more were brought forward at a press conference in 2007. Some more were brought forward in a press conference at the National Press Club in 2010. And then, of course, comes the citizen hearing on disclosure, where 40 witnesses were brought to the National Press Club, but not to give a press conference, but to testify before 4 members of Congress for 30 hours and 5 days. So everybody sort of knows these witnesses there. What hasn't happened is that these witnesses are not given a chance to go on Capitol Hill and testify before congressional committees. And there's a reason for that. The people in the know within government that know this issue, maybe because they're even involved in it, managing it, know full well that, certainly since 92, that if any hearings were held with these kinds of witnesses before the committee, that would be the end of the truth embargo. That would be it, period. Right. These hearings would be extensively covered by tons of media. They'd be broadcast around the world, and you'd have these committee members listening to this testimony and basically undergoing the same kind of reaction that the citizen hearing committee members, former members of Congress, underwent. And so those hearings have not been allowed to happen. Every effort to get hearings has been blocked or died out, but it just didn't happen. And there have been a number of attempts. Well, this is going to be the most intensive ever. And we have a very powerful tool to help us get a job done, and that is the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure DVDs, the edited record of the whole citizen hearing, which will be delivered to everybody on the Hill in January. Now, and this has been announced. This has been announced. There's major press releases haven't gone out, but it's been announced going all the way back into early November that this is coming. So with that in mind, some things just happened which I can't help but be intrigued by. First, December the 4th, 6 days ago. Out of the blue, I didn't know this was coming. It may have been announced, I just didn't catch it. But out of the blue, the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee holds a little 2-hour hearing, on Capitol Hill for 3 astrobiologists, and it's called the Hearing on Astrobiology. And these 3 astrobiologists come in, and they testify to the usual safe stuff about how to think about life outside the planet, what it might be like, the new exoplanet discoveries, the increased likelihood of life elsewhere, how they might find life on another planet. It's all this kind of stuff. All the kind of safe stuff that Sagan was even talking about 30 years ago. But they held this hearing in the middle of December, and they knew they were going to take a lot of criticism over it, which they did, meaning, you guys are not getting anything done, but here you are talking to astrobiologists about extraterrestrials. But they did it anyway, and it went very nicely. The Democrats and Republicans got along splendidly because it's a nonpartisan issue. They asked some reasonably good questions. The whole thing is up on YouTube. You can go watch the whole 2 hours. And that was on the 4th of December. And I said, well, that's interesting. What a coincidence. They held this little hearing just a few weeks before PRG is going to launch its full frontal assault, on the Hill. And then 4 days later, Barack Obama is at the Kennedy Center.
Right.
As part of the Kennedy Center honors. Now, those are taped then. They were taped on the 8th. Now, that show will appear on the 29th of December. But the news is already out about it, and one of the honorees is Shirley Mclean. Now, Mclean knows a lot about this subject, including stuff she's learned directly from presidents. Some of which she's never told anybody. So he introduces her. In the process, he brings up Area 51 and makes a little joke and talks about how he wants to know about stuff like that. He calls Shirley. And then he makes the interesting comment, I guess I'm the first president to ever say Area 51.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting.
Yep.
Right? And then the next day, article, New York Times. Let's give a little background to this. I talked about it on your show. 1993, Launch Rockefeller approaches the Clinton administration. He wants Bill Clinton to release all the UFO files. He wants him to grant an amnesty to anybody in the government to come forward and bring the information out. In other words, he wants disclosure. He wants Bill Clinton to be the disclosure president.
Right.
Thus begins the Rockefeller Initiative. It lasts for 3 years. During those 3 years, John Podesta was a key advisor to Clinton in the White House and fully aware that this initiative was going on. Later, he becomes Clinton's chief of staff in the last 4 years. After Clinton leaves office, John Podesta, in 2002, comes to the National Press Club and on camera states that the government should release all its UFO files. He comes back in 2003 and states it again. He then makes similar comments in a foreword to a book by Leslie Kane.
Well,
as of December the 9th, according to an article in the New York Times, Barack Obama is bringing John Podesta back into the White House.
I saw that posting, yes. I saw you post that
to be, quote, a counselor. He's going to be a counselor for a year. In other words, he's coming. In other words, he's not just going to be hanging out. He's already, I guess you say, a non-hired advisor. He's coming in to be formally part of the White House for a year, because the quote, as the Times put it, the Obama administration is in a very bad place, lowest ratings ever.
I got to ask a question. Do we know what position he's going to come in as? Has it been announced what exactly his title is going to be, what his duties are going to entail?
The only thing that the Times has said was that he would be a counselor to the president, which means that no formal position has been assigned. So I guess you could say that's really basically an aide to the president.
Well, if he's a counselor, does that mean Obama's a camper? I'm sorry I have to crack that joke, but he acts like a child sometimes. I set you up. You went for it. I appreciate that. But also they mentioned that he might be advising him about certain domestic policies or whatever. Look, all I can say is, by the way, Time magazine today comes out with an article on its website, jumps on this right away. I mean, the article was about the fact that, they're bringing Podesta back, but here's 5 reasons why they may not want to. And they list a number of things that Podesta has said and commented on that are not favorable to Obama's tenure so far. He's been frank and somewhat critical of Obama from time to time.
Yeah, he's been very vocal about Obama's presidential administration.
And it listed 5 things. And guess what the 5th one was? UFOs.
Oh, really?
And Time Magazine is talking about how he called for the release of files. And so Time Magazine just re-brought that up and stuck it right back out there. And so these 3 things happened December the 4th, December the 8th, and December the 9th, and then the Time Magazine article, December the 10th. This is pretty unusual. And so I'm contemplating this. And I'm saying, well, let me just throw out just a speculation, just a thought for your listeners. If I'm Barack Obama and my presidency is sinking out of sight, and I'm losing my mojo, and the
even Oprah's turning
numbers are down, the approval ratings are down, I need to turn things around. Do I really think that bringing John Podesta in from the Center for American Progress to give me some counseling on domestic policy is going to turn my administration around?
Probably not.
Like he's some magic wizard. He's going to come in and give me a couple of tips and the next. No. Why? What could John Podesta possibly do that could really turn around the Obama administration from being a major, how would you say, failure as a president overall, with some successes, as opposed to a legacy president? Well, there's one thing.
With disclosure.
If I needed somebody to advise me on disclosure, how to do it, and also needed somebody to negotiate with the military intelligence community, where a deal has to be struck for Obama to take action, he's the number one guy. He's the guy you go to. He would be it. And so I'm just throwing that out as a possibility. Now, I have no idea if that's true or not, but I know one thing. I'm sure as hell going to be talking about it. I'm going to be bringing it up extensively. And did they really think that they were going to bring Podesta into the White House and that wasn't going to be out there? So apparently they weren't particularly concerned about having UFOs and John Podesta in the same sentence for the next year. So I'm just telling folks to pay attention. I said before, we're close to the end on this.
Yes,
we're getting things in a position where I think there's only one way to go, and that's disclosure. The Congress is in a position where they got nowhere to go but up, and hearings on this would bring them an enormous amount of attention. The president has no way to go but up, and being the disclosure president would be a massive game changer, legacy maker. All of this is coming together pretty nicely, so that's just something to think about. I'm looking for all these little signs, all these little indicators that something is going on, because I can assure you they're not going to tell you. They're not going to tell you why Podesta's really been brought in. They're not going to tell you why, Obama decides to mention Area 51 at a major event, the Kennedy Center Honors. It's going to be broadcast to millions of people on December the 29th, or why the Congress decides just before PRG is about to arrive in town, they're going to hold a small hearing on Extraterrestrial. They're not going to tell you, but if you read between the lines, you may see that something's going on.
Stephen, recently, and I think it was actually in the last couple of days, Obama's been over, as everybody knows, Nelson Mandela also passed away, and he's been over in South Africa for the last few days. And it's been all over the news. He actually shook hands with Raul Castro, or the Castro brothers from Cuba. You can throw that also in there, because for years we wouldn't even interact wherever they were. We would just walk away and not shake hands with them. It's almost like they're trying to, find common ground across the board on this planet to kind of talk about a larger subject.
Look, I know that he's searching for some legacy. I mean, when you watch his speech the other day that he gave, or not speech, rather, the interview that he gave to Chris Matthews, he's now in a real lame duck situation. He's in the final years. He's not going to run again, and I think he's at the point where he just doesn't care so much about dancing to the House of Representatives tune that all the game playing that's going on that's really not going anywhere. I think he's trying to separate from that and do some strong things, make some strong statements in order to possibly have a legacy. And you're going to see a number of things like that.
His approval is at an all-time low, so I mean, this would be the perfect time for him to do something that would really shake his presidency up, and at least he could have the last couple of years and have something positive out of it. Stephen, it's such a it's a real shame that Lloyd Pye did pass away, and he's not going to get to see what might come in the next couple of years. Is Lloyd at all involved in the movie, the Truth Embargo movie?
No.
Was he going to be involved in that?
Not in the movie. No, it's not. That the movie was not. Its focus is elsewhere. So no, he was not. But he's been in some docs. There are a number of people that didn't make it. There's a number of people that are leaving before the final act of this play plays out, and there may be a few more that will depart before we get this resolved. But that's the way it is. The government hung on to this thing for 67 years. There are probably some people in government like to hang on to it for 67 more, but that's not the way it's going to happen. Our goal is to get these hearings right now. That is the goal, because the hearings means the end of the truth embargo. So one automatically develops the other. So the focus is on getting the hearings, and you're going to see a lot happening there. You're going to see a lot of press, and we'll see where it goes. But
my friend,
I'm getting a very good vibe. Yes.
The future is going to be, I think, just an incredible ride for all of us. And I really do hope that we get to see disclosure in our lifetime. I really do. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And again, giving the final memory to the audience of your encounters with Lloyd Pye and giving us an update on what you're working on.
Send those who have his contact, email and so forth, or his Facebook, leave a note of appreciation. His sister and other members of his family, his mother, I know that they will like that, and it will be nice for them to hear that. He was one of the good guys, without question.
Yeah,
he was dedicated. He worked hard. He was a good guy. He didn't criticize others. If all of us can be like Lloyd, let me tell you, this work would be much more satisfying and maybe a little bit more productive. So we mourn his loss, but ultimately we will vindicate his work and the work of a lot of other people when the government finally does what it inevitably has to do, and that's acknowledge the ET presence once and for all.
Agreed. Thank you so much again, Stephen.